Hi everyone. Today we're going to be working through how to convert between decimals, percentages, and fractions. So let's first start with going between a fraction and a percentage. Before we answer the problem on the page here, take a look at this graphic to the left. It's a really handy note sheet that can just quickly help you know how to go between the two. So in the case of our problem, we want to go from a percentage to a fraction. So if we look at our notes to help us with that, we have a percentage and we want to go up to a fraction, meaning the way that we're going to do that is we are going to take our percentage and divide that by 100. And then we will have our fraction. It may need simplified, but that's really all we have to do. So our percentage in this case is 85%. So we're going to take that percentage and to turn it into a fraction, we will divide by 100. The reason that we're dividing by 100 is when we're working with percentages, 100% is typically considered our max. That's our goal. If we even think about grades, 100% is considered an A. 100% is the highest grade you usually can earn. I will give a little caveat here to say that it's possible to go above 100%. It's possible to earn, extra credit. It's possible to double or triple something. So even though we can go beyond 100%, 100% is typically what's considered, a whole amount in that goal. All right, off my soapbox, back to the problem here. So we do have a fraction, 85 over 100. But that is not simplified, and we always want to simplify, otherwise known as reduce, our fractions. So when we do that, we look for a common factor that we can divide both 85 and 100 by. Well, I notice that my numbers end in 5 and 0. Whenever your numbers end in either a 5 or a 0, that means they're divisible by 5. That's what I'm going to start with, because when the numbers are large, sometimes it can be hard to see, what's in common. So looking for easy things like, can they be divided by 5? Can they be divided by 10? Are they both even numbers and can be divided by 2 can make your fraction smaller, and then maybe you'll be able to see other things. So we're going to simplify this by dividing by 5. 85 divided by 5 is 17. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. Are there any other common factors other than 1 that we can simplify this by? Nope, they're not both even. We can't go by 2, we can't go by 5, and 17, in fact, is a prime. And so that is it. Our 85% as a fraction is 17 over 20. All right, now let's go the other way. Let's take a fraction and convert it to a percentage. So we look over here to the left at our notes. We're starting with a fraction. So let's follow our arrow and we are converting it. We are going down and changing it to a percent. That means right here is what we need to do. We need to take our fraction and multiply it by 100. Well, that actually makes makes some sense, because one direction we divide, and then if we undo that and go the other way, we do the inverse, which would be multiply. So that kind of makes sense. We'll take our fraction 3/10, and we are going to multiply that by 100, and it will convert it to a percentage. We have a fraction times a whole number. Both of them need to be fractions. How can we rewrite 100 as a fraction? We can put it over 1. Remember, any number can be rewritten as a fraction by putting it over 1. Then we need to multiply our fractions. When we multiply fractions, we just go straight across. So numerator times numerator, 3 times 100 would be 300. And then denominator times denominator, 10 times 1 would be 10. All right, let's simplify this fraction here, see if I get a whole number or a decimal, what my percentage is going to be. And 30 actually does, sorry, not 30, 300 does divide evenly by 10. 300 divided by 10 is equal to 30, which would make this 30%. So 3/10 of a fraction in percentage form is 30%. All right, let's move on and now go from decimals to percentages. If we look at our graphic here, if we are going from a decimal to a percent, the way we do that is actually the way we do a fraction. We multiply by 100 because that is out of 100%. However, there's something cool. When we're dealing with decimals, there's actually a little shortcut that we can take. Instead of actually multiplying by 100, we can simply move our decimal point 2 places to the right. And a way to kind of help you remember that it needs to be moved twice is 100 has 2 zeros in it. So we need to move that decimal place 2 zeros or 2 spaces to the right. And that is the same thing as multiplying by 100. It's just a little bit faster. So we take this first decimal here, 0 and 45 hundredths, and I'm converting it to a percentage. I can move my decimal point 2 places to the right. So it would end up here, just making it a plain 45, and that would be 45%. If we look at question B, 0 and 9/10. If I want to make that a percentage, I need to move my decimal point 2 places to the right. So we're going to move it 1, 2 places. When I do that, notice that there's not enough numbers. There's an empty space. So that empty space gets filled in with a 0, giving us 90%. Last but not least, we have 0.4836. Doesn't matter how many numbers we have. If we're taking that decimal, converting it to a percentage, we always move it 2 places. So 1, 2 places would bring us right here, giving us 48 and 36 hundredths of a percent. And it is okay for us to have a percentage that is still represented by a decimal. Once again, if you kind of think of your grades and you look at, when you check out your grade screen, it usually has 2 decimal points in your percentage. Like you have a 84.35%. So it is acceptable to have percentages that are still a decimal value, but we have converted this true and pure decimal into a percent by moving it 2 places to the right. All right, before I do this example, I'm going to go ahead and provide the code word for this video. So if you are watching this video to learn from your mistakes and earn another attempt on the 401 quiz, the code word that you need to email to your teacher is taco. So the code word that you need to email to your teacher is taco. Make sure you finish watching this video, okay? Because we still have 2 more examples that we're going to do, and it's going to be working with our decimals and fractions, okay? All right, code word was just shared. It's taco. Now let's do 2 more examples so you can finish the video and really understand what you did wrong and do better on your quiz. So we want to know the decimal equivalent of 4/6 or 4/6. Look over here. Once again, we have a little note sheet and it has, an arrow going this way saying if you're starting as a fraction and you want a decimal, this is how you need to go. And then the bottom example is the reverse. If you have a decimal and you're going to a fraction, that's what you need to do. Well, in this case, we have a fraction and we want the equivalent or the equal decimal. The way we do that is through division. And the most important part is that you set up your division properly. We are dividing the numerator by the denominator, and it will always be that way when you have a fraction. Because in our example here, we have 4/6. Another way to say that is 4 divided by 6. So it has to be set up correctly. So 4, which is our numerator, is being divided by 6. It will always be set up this way, where your numerator is on the inside and your denominator is on the outside. Now that we've done this, we can start our division process. But hold up. Can 6 go into 4? Is 6 times anything 4? No, so I immediately need to rewrite this 4 as a decimal. We can rewrite our 4 as 4.0. That doesn't change its value. It's just like when you turn something into a fraction by putting it over 1. It's a different form. It doesn't change the value at all. When we're dividing with decimals, remember that you take your decimal point and you bring it straight up. And then honestly, after you do that, you kind of forget about it. Just make sure that you bring it straight up so it doesn't get lost when you have your final answer. Now let's get back to dividing. All right, we said 6 cannot go into 4, so that would be 0 times. But we can now look at this 4.0 and look at it as 40 because we brought our decimal up. Now we can just kind of ignore it. How many times can 6 go in to 40? It can go 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. So we're going to subtract and see what we have left over. 40 minus 36 is 4. We need to continue on until either we have no more remainders at the bottom, or until we notice that there's a repeating pattern, and therefore we would have a repeating decimal. So we can go ahead and add another 0 on, bring it down, and that 4 becomes a 40. That looks kind of familiar. Well, 6 can go into 40 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36, and I'm left over with 4. I think we've discovered a pattern. We've discovered a repeating decimal because we continue to get 40 over and over and over again. Once you recognize that pattern, you are allowed to stop. And then remember, the best way to write repeating decimals is to use that line on top to show that the 6 continues to repeat and goes on forever and ever. All right, here's our final example. We want the decimal equivalent of 20 1/3. When you have a mixed number, it's not super different than if you just have a regular fraction. The whole number aspect here of our mixed number, that 20, is a whole 20. So that is going to go in front of our decimal point because that is 20 whole pieces. Then our fraction, the 1/3, we'll turn that into a decimal, and that will go after the decimal point because that is our partial amount, our incomplete amount. It doesn't quite make a whole. So we honestly can just turn that 1/3 into a decimal, and then we'll end up having our answer. I am going to erase part of this because my circle makes it look like it's 20.0. So let's maybe do a square instead. All right, so remember the way that we turn fractions into decimals is through division, and it is 1 being divided by 3. So your numerator goes on the inside, Denominator, which is what you're dividing by, goes on the outside. How many times can 3 go into 1? It can't. So we're going to add our decimal point and a 0. Make sure to bring that decimal point straight up. So we already said 3 cannot go into 1 at all, but how about 3 into 10? That can go 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So 10 minus 9 is 1. Add another 0 and bring it down. You get 10 again. It's kind of looking like it might be repeating, but let's do it one more time just to check our facts here. 3 can go into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We subtract that and we get 1 again. Yep, we have a pattern of we're continuing to get a 1 that turns into a 10 every time, meaning we have another repeating decimal. So we're going to take this and we're going to put it together with the whole number part of our mixed number. So as a decimal, it is 20.3 repeating. All right, what to do next? If you have not yet completed the 401 quiz, then go ahead and complete that quiz. Remember that there is a direct link posted in the gradebook, as well as this review video, and a copy of the notes are there that you can reference as much as you need while you're taking that quiz. If you are watching this video because you need another attempt on the 401 quiz, make sure you remember that code word I shared with you a moment ago. Email it to your teacher and we'll be able to unlock that for you. All right, good luck, guys. You got this.